I want to follow that up with a conversation between Susan Meyer, who is the head of Talent and Inclusion Strategy at Marsh McLennan Companies. Susan's been a very vocal and supportive champion for us. And Mathew Cunningham, who is the CFO of Oliver Wyman, which is one of the operating companies in MMC. They're going to come up now. I go to a lot of events. If any of you know me, you see me at a lot of events. I hear people talking about what finance wants out of learning in HR a lot, but it's very rare to actually have an opportunity to talk to a CFO, so that's what we're hoping to get out of this morning. So to kick us off, everybody in the room probably knows of Mercer, but Mathew, maybe you can just give everybody a little bit more of a feel for the scope and breadth of MMC's operations.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Todd, for inviting Susan and I to join you today. Mercer is one of 4 operating companies within Marsh McLennan Companies. So we organize ourselves into 2 segments. We have a risk and insurance services segment where we have Marsh, which is one of the world-leading insurance brokers and risk managers, and Guy Carpenter, which is one of the world-leading reinsurance brokers and risk managers, both very sizable, both at the top of, if you will, the league tables in that space. And then we have the consulting segment, which includes Mercer as the larger component that, again, all of you don't need me to tell you about Mercer. And then they call us the Little Penguin. We're Oliver Wyman. We are one of the top global management consulting, economic consulting, brand consulting firms. And those are the 4 operating businesses. And then we have a corporate center, which has several thousand employees that support the operating businesses. And I think in total we have about 65,000 employees across 100-plus countries across the globe. But the common theme through all of those businesses is the fact that we don't produce a product, right? When we talk about people, people are our business. The common theme, the common vision is how do we bring the best talent together? How do we apply that talent in the marketplace so we can deliver value for our clients, for our shareholders, and for our colleagues? It's a little bit motherhood and apple pie, but essentially we are a people business. Our assets, come in every day and leave at the end of the day and hopefully come back the next day. So it really is fundamental to our business, because there isn't a plant that we have to develop. There isn't a product that we have to produce. Our service comes from the counsel of our people.
So fun fact, David Blake, our co-founder, was an Oliver Wyman alumni, started his career there. So obviously we believe that, but you hear that phrase, people are our greatest assets, a lot. The reason that we invited Jean-Marc is I read an article in the Wall Street Journal a year and a half ago called literally CEOs no longer say people are our greatest assets, which was about that research. And so when you start digging into the question of why that is, people are literally not accounted for as assets.
Right.
And so what that means is you get this attitude that people are a bottom line cost. How do you guys reconcile that?
Yeah, so I felt a little set up in the opening commentary when he was talking about having to go ask for money and the sort. So I guess a bit of a disclaimer. So I'm not a traditional CFO or finance colleague. So I've been at Oliver Wyman for 28 years, but I started on the business side. So the first 15 years of my career, I was a line consultant, a line partner. And then I took a career shift into the finance organization and into this role as CFO. So what I'm about to say I might be violating some sort of secret oath of accountants or something. But fundamentally, I don't think that, I'm sorry, I'm a little loud. I don't think that accounting rules should be driving the decisions we take as an organization. Accounting can't drive the business. The business needs to decide what we need to do that we think is going to create value, and then let the accounting fall where it does. And so we sit around saying, what are we going to do? What do we think is going to have the greatest impact for our clients, for our shareholders, and for our colleagues? You'll hear me say that 3 or 4 times. That is the holy trinity, if you will, of our business. It's delivering for clients, delivering for shareholders, and delivering for our colleagues. And then it's my job and the job of Mark McGivney as the MMC CFO and Dan Glazer as the CEO of MMC to convince all the constituents that, hey, this path we're on is going to create value. It may not show up in the numbers in this quarter or in that quarter, and there are challenges in the quarters, don't get me wrong, but that it's our job to paint that vision. And the bottom line, pardon the pun, of our business is that it is dependent on all of our human capital. I mean, we call our human resources organization the human capital organization because that's what it is. And we know that if we invest in our talent, that's going to deliver greater value for our clients and pay great dividends. And again, it's incumbent on me to be able to convince the MMC board, to convince my boss, the MMC CFO, and collectively to convince external constituents that the path we're on is going to generate value. So I don't get caught up too much in the, should the accounting rules change? We can't be beholden to the accounting rules. Now, I'm sure there are times I'll have conversations where we have to deal with some short-term pressures, but fundamentally, I think that's, again, it's my job to translate the vision, the talent development vision, and the ultimate client value proposition into, how it's going to manifest itself well for the organization.
Thanks. So can we take that down maybe one notch from the sort of conceptual to the practical? How do you look at the value generated by the human capital organization, the function? How are you guys viewing how you work with them in the context of creating value?
Yeah, so, it's hard to assign a metric, is the way I would put at it. I mean, you can build models, you can make, but the assumptions you have to take about, to get to the 1.3 quadrillion, I think was the number that was quoted earlier, is very difficult. So I don't believe in trying to be overly precise in it. I think what we know is if we attract talent, at rates better than our main competitors, if we retain that talent, we will deliver more value ultimately. We'll be able to solve client problems. We'll be able to do more value to our clients. So the issue is, how do we attract and retain talent the greatest? And quite honestly, I mean, there is a little bit of this Gen Z issue around, a focus on, perhaps an increased focus on personal investment in training development. But fundamentally, it's giving them the tools they need to succeed. And that's where our focus is. And we know that, if we take a new consultant and we grow them into a partner over 7-8 years, that has tremendous value for the organization. So that's our focus.
Okay. So Susan, the relationship with Mathew is driven heavily by the work you guys have done on the Finance Academy specifically for the finance organization at MMC. Can you talk a little bit about how that works and how that came to be?
Yeah, sure. So we did embark on this journey about 1.5 years ago to create a Finance Academy within MMC, which stretches across all of our operating companies, so our full global finance organization. And it really started with our leadership team, Mathew and Mark McGivney, reaching out to HR and saying, hey, thanks for all you're doing. It ain't good enough. We need more. And we kind of took a hard look at what we were doing. We, like many companies, we invest a lot in learning and development, and we have some really great programs, certainly at the top of the house, in person, expensive, and they're fantastic, but they only touch a few people relative to the size of our entire organization. So what we lacked was a way to really bring cutting-edge finance skills and knowledge to the rest of our finance community, all 2,300-ish colleagues globally. So that was the challenge that we were given. We needed to find a way to do that. And thankfully, we discovered or knew of a company that was in the business of solving such a problem or helping us solve such a problem. So that started our relationship with Degreed and launched ultimately our Finance Academy. So what it's given us is really a way to bring together all of the disparate places that our finance colleagues were going to try and learn, which was a mess and not something that we could really wrap our hands around. It was just all over the place. It allowed us to bring it together into one place and make learning not only easy but relevant to our colleagues. So over the course of the past year and a half, we have been able to pull in all kinds of different content. Some of it is paid, a lot of it is unpaid, and we have, frankly, our finance colleagues have reached out and say, hey, we get great content from XYZ. Can you pull that into the ecosystem and integrate? And we've had actually really positive results in having some of those conversations with large global organizations that we would never have thought we could pull in. But we've been able to do that, and instead of colleagues being on their email and getting pinged 12 times a day or, doing something else we don't even know about, we now have everything in one place. Our colleagues can go there, they can find content that's very relevant to them, and they're really engaging with it. So I'll give you one example. In our controllership organization, they've been busily building pathways within the platform. It's great, and they're building these things in consultation with me, but in the way that they need to build it. So there's a section on onboarding for new colleagues. What does controllership do? Who do you need? Who's who in this organization? And they've pulled in their policies and procedures. How they need to account for things. There's a section on thought leadership. What's changing in our industry? What do you need to be aware of? And they've set up groups, and they can exchange and pass information around with each other. So it's really starting to break down barriers and create the ecosystem that's just ripe for them to learn. And Mathew, you go on. You're posting articles.
Yeah, I think there's two. I'd make 2 points to follow on what you said. I think you started with the leadership team came to you and to the HR organization. I think that's a critical, if you will, success factor, which is it can't be a push from the HC or HR community on leadership and development programs. I mean, yes, the technical expertise, the expertise is there to bring the approaches and the content to bear, but it needs to be a pull from the business. There has to be a cultural commitment to talent is at the core of our value proposition for clients and shareholders, and therefore we are going to partner with you. So, if and honestly, in the seat I'm at, if someone, if the HC organization comes to me and says, here's a program we want to do, but it's not connected with our overall strategy, it's less likely to get funded than if we're collectively working to make that, part of the achievement of the vision. So I think the pull from the business versus push from HR, I think, is an important distinction. The second point, I can't overestimate the importance or overstate the importance of the platform. Dating myself a bit, my training when I joined Oliver Wyman, we had 40 people 28 years ago. Training was, my first training program, probably only training program in the first year, was how to cut and paste numbers on a presentation. I mean, literally mean scissors and tape, back in the day. But even even a few years ago, training was, okay, we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation in a conference room. Do I have 2 hours to go to it? So we had good content, but it didn't resonate. It was hard to get the organization behind it. The platform is critical. I mean, I myself find myself, here's, I got half an hour here. I'm going to look, here's a pathway someone set up. Here's some interesting on blockchain. I'm like, I swear I don't understand blockchain. But so, here's something that's going to help me understand that. So the way the technology can be brought, the platform and the openness. I mean, you talked about most of the content that I read is recommended by someone in our finance organization that's seen something, seen an article, read a story, posted it, recommends it. That's where the real value comes from, because you now sit, it's that distributed approach. So another 2 points I'd highlight.
Yeah, it's really been fascinating to not only start and develop and co-develop this Finance Academy, but to watch it grow and start to see how our colleagues are really getting into building a culture of learning. They don't know they're doing it, but they're doing it, and they're sharing and they're exchanging knowledge, and it's it's pretty exciting. And now that we're not at the end of our journey, we're just at the beginning, but we've got the culture piece forming, and the exciting thing for me is just strategically, now that that's off and running, I'm starting to think about the skill building and measuring, because that's another important piece of what is valuable to us, being in the people business.
And I think, just to follow up on that one last point, and then get another question.
They don't want to hear from me.
But I think it will evolve,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and I think we've brought content that we think is relevant. As I said, we have our own colleagues who are developing and recommending some content. But I think what we'll find is we'll develop these pathway concepts. We'll develop a core set of, a core curriculum, if you will, for various parts of the finance community and then the broader community, to give them the skills that we've now been able to see are important. So right now you cast a wide net, you get a lot of input in there, and then as we measure and track where people go, what they do, and we can then tie that ultimately to performance outcomes, that's going to give us a very substantial sort of view into what the curriculum is, and then we can kind of hone and focus.
Yeah.
So I think there's some great opportunities there. It's going to take time. We're in year 1+ of the program, but I'm very optimistic about what we'll be able to get out of it.
Sure.
So you bring up a really interesting point in terms of measuring skills. Obviously, that's important to us. It's the theme of the event. Susan, when we were talking last week, the phrase you used was skills are the currency. When I say, my wife works in finance at a big pharmaceutical company, and when I say stuff like that, she tells me I sound like a Silicon Valley cartoon. But we're hearing that more and more lately, right? What exactly does that mean to both of you guys?
I can start with that. For me, I think about what is a currency. It's just a means to store and exchange value at the end of the day. And I think about that in the context of our people. Again, we're in the people business. They actually are our biggest assets, despite not being portrayed that way on a balance sheet or so forth. But our business is our people, and our people are valuable to us. And what makes them valuable are the capabilities and the skill sets that they bring with them to work every day. So in that sense, skills are like a currency, it's exciting for us to think about how we might be actually finally able to measure some of this stuff. I mean, in the past, if we wanted to understand someone's skill set, we could see if they've got a certification, if they're a CPA, or if they've got some other, kind of, letters after their name. But we've never had a way to really do that for the masses. We didn't have a feature that was scalable, that we could measure skills for everybody. And that's kind of what we're really excited about from the degree product, is to now be able to do that. And just from a human capital perspective, having a manager and a colleague be able to rate skills. So you have the colleague go in, they'll rate themselves against a set of skills, and then have their manager rate that same set of skills for that same colleague. It starts a dialogue between the manager and their direct report around, hey, you thought I was a 5 on this, I thought I was a 6, like what's missing? It really starts to have that, opening, it opens up that dialogue to have a career conversation, and that's really, really invaluable. And we can start to see that, on an individual basis. But then the exciting part also is at the macro level, as we aggregate the results of all of these different data points around skills and how we're measuring, we can really start to see not only where our strengths are, but where our gaps are. And that's really valuable, because then I don't have to guess anymore about where to invest money in content providers or learning and development programs. I can tell exactly where we need to invest, and that makes a much easier conversation with Mathew from a financial perspective. And so it informs our investments in learning. It can also inform our investments in talent acquisition, because if we know we've got gaps in skill sets and we know we need to fill them and we need to fill them quickly, maybe that informs where we're looking in the marketplace to bring in external talent to supplement our skill sets. And honestly, I actually even wonder if we can use this for staffing down the road, if we know who's good at what, and we have consulting projects coming up that we know we need skills for.
Well, and I think that's actually a very important point, because I think as you said, the information that we get from the platform and how people use the platform, will allow us for the entirety of the organization to understand, I don't know what badges they've earned, or whatever, but to the breadth of their experience. And look, we know jobs that are, a solo skill is required are going to go away. What's going to be required today, certainly, and in the future, are multi-dimensional capabilities. And so the currency for our colleagues of being able to demonstrate and have demonstrated that the breadth and portfolio of their skills, that's their currency in their own advancement, whether it's in the consulting side or the finance community or the like. So I think, again, information is key, and the platform allows us to get access to that.
Yeah.
So we're running close to time. I want to make sure the audience has time for some questions. So while you guys all think of your questions and the microphones start running around, one last question for Mathew. Any sort of parting words of advice from a CFO
to a largely HR community? Yeah. Well, it's funny. When I took over this job and came from the business side, I found HR and finance seemed to be at war with each other, and I struggled to understand that. It seemed like each function was trying to undermine the other. We weren't at all coordinated. And I think the important, and this isn't rocket sciences, but not to think as a silo. The way we broke through it is cross-functional teams. We thought of, in some cases, we brought some HR colleagues into my organization. Some of my finance colleagues went into the HR organization at cross-breed, so we could have, we could approach things from a firm-wide perspective. But don't think of the finance organization as just, sometimes I get the moniker Dr. No when it comes to budget time, but we're all pulling towards the same ultimate vision in terms of what we need to do from a strategic perspective to succeed with our various constituents, and it's that collaborative aspect that's critical. There's language issues around. You got to do a little bit of numbers when you're doing your pitches, from an ask perspective, but fundamentally it's getting the culture of we're all a core leadership team trying to achieve the vision. The functional designation just means, part of our job we have to do some tasks, but it's, we've got the firm hat, not the functional hat, and I think that's important.
So that's a theme we're going to explore a lot more later in the day about how do we actually build that collaborative relationship. But in the meantime, are there any questions in the audience for Mathew or Susan? You don't count. Okay, yes?
Hi, my name is Joyce. Oh, someone else?
Hi, Joyce.
Hi. A question for Susan. I mean, it sounds like you have a fantastic partner in finance, and they've come to you, and you've created this, between the two of you, you've created this great academy. How have you balanced that with the rest of the organization? Are you using it as a lever to say, see what we've done here for finance, who else wants to cooperate? Or are they claiming foul play and saying, you're giving all your attention over to finance and not to us?
Not at all. I mean, this has started a fantastic conversation. I mean, it started with finance, but, it's just a bright spot of where we've been able to accomplish something wonderful through this partnership for a part of our organization. And it started a dialogue for others in the organization to think about, hey, what are we doing? How can we, up the ante for our colleagues and make it, we talked about wanting to attract and retain talent, and the presentation earlier talking about people really want to learn. I think we found that through the Finance Academy. People want to learn, and our job is to make it easy for them and make what they learn relevant. So it's, we're in early days. We just launched in January, and we're excited for this journey. We're looking at data and metrics and figuring out ways to use it for everyone's benefit. So it's definitely started a dialogue. I haven't heard anybody say, you're favoring finance or whatever. It's, I hope we'll do.
But it's interesting, it triggered, just connecting to the last question you asked me, I think it's very important that we do pilots and proofs of concept. That resonates, I'll tell you, from the finance hat of mine, being able to take a smaller population, prove it works there, or demonstrate the value, is a lot easier for the finance team to swallow than we want to do a blast. So I think we're trying to be the shining light of how this can work for the rest of the organization, and I expect we'll see, greater proliferation as time goes on.
Thank you.
So my question actually was similar. I'm Enid Crystal from BlackRock. So my question was, are you planning on other academies at Marsh? However, I'll change now. So how involved is your team, Susan, with the creation of the academies? Do you have somebody embedded in finance? Is there somebody dedicated just to working and curating content with? Because it sounds like there's a lot of user-generated.
Yeah,
so how does that work?
absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you. Matthew's mentioned it. It's a really strong partnership. I mean, my job in HR, representing L&D in this case, I can't solve, the controllership's needs around what they need to know. They're the experts. I'm not an expert in what controllers do. But through partnership and sort of me bringing more of a consultative approach to this business problem, we've been able to really do this together. So I did not build the controllership pathway. Our controllers built the controllership pathway. I advise them on what they might want to put in it. I advise them about the user experience, the journey that they would take our colleagues on. But it's really our experts in the business that have done that and created that with some help from me.
Well, and it's front and center. I mean, we had just yesterday, Mark McGivney, the MMC CFO, had a global town hall, and one of the three things we spent time talking about was Finance Academy. And so tone from the top and that leadership engagement is absolutely critical.
Yeah. Thanks.
I think we have time for maybe one more. Nobody in the back has questions?
Hi, this is Ashley Graham from Texas Capital Bank, and I was very interested to hear that within your pathways, you also have a path or an area around policies and procedures. Being in the financial industry as well, we are fighting all of the regulatory education that has to go on. Have you been able to leverage Degreed and that pathway for policies and procedures to lessen or perhaps make more interesting the compliance education that you are also required to deploy?
Think about how I answer that. So in terms of the controllership pathway, they have pulled in a lot of content that previously was housed on various SharePoints that some people might know where to find them, but maybe everybody didn't know, and they'd have to ask, how do I find out what to do in this situation? So it's certainly created more transparency, and it's made it much easier for our finance colleagues to find what they need to know. And there's all kinds of stuff in there, R2R, revenue recognition, like what do you do, how do you handle this? And it's very deeply technical and financial beyond my level of expertise. But the fact that they've got that in one place and it makes it easy to find, I think that's really massively beneficial. We're a complex organization. We're very matrixed, and for any new person coming in, it's hard. They're like, oh, I know, I need to know something about this, but who do I ask? Where do I go? How do I find out about it? Well, now we can tell them exactly where they go to find out what they need to do. So I do think it's helped from that standpoint. And just as it relates to you mentioned the word compliance, we have been able to pull in from our LMS our compliance courses and raise them into the Degreed platform. So they're readily accessible and available, and you go through, it drops you into the LMS, it records that you actually took the training, and you get straight back into the other platform. So hopefully that answers your question.
Great. So we're going to take a quick break in a second. First of all, I want to say thank you very much to Susan and Mathew.